Hello everyone, this is David Chen from the /filmcast at /filmcast.com, and we have a real treat for you today. I recently had the opportunity to moderate a panel at the Northwest Film Forum in Seattle. The title of the panel was Making and Distributing Challenging Indie Films, and there were three very talented filmmakers who share their insights from their work in the indie film world. So I hope you will enjoy this audio. Just know that the audio was recorded using smartphones only, so it's not necessarily the normal level of podcast audio that I put out, but the insights and the conversation I think are really fascinating, and so I share it with you today. Hope you enjoy listening. Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's panel. My name is David Chen. I'm the host of podcasts such as the /Filmcast and the Tobolowsky Files, and we have an awesome hour of discussion of independent film tonight. I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Let's start with Mischa Jakupcak. Mischa Jakupcak produced the critically acclaimed film The Off Hours, Koinonia, and The Immortal Augustus Glasstone, directed by Robin Miller. She line produced several features with North by Northwest, and she and Lacey Leavitt, another guest and panelist, are founders of Mechanical Dreams, a new Seattle-based production company focused on developing and producing films, documentaries, and VR projects. Also joining us, Lacey Leavitt is, as I just mentioned, the co-founder of Mechanical Dreams, and she has produced films such as The Off Hours, Safety Not Guaranteed, Laggies, Lucky Them, and The Automatic Hate, which you will see shortly, and which will have a limited theatrical release. And also, Megan Griffiths, sitting right next to me, has written and directed films such as The Off Hours and Eden. Her newest film, The Night Stalker, which stars Lou Diamond Phillips as serial killer Richard Ramirez, can be seen later this year. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause.
Maybe we could swing the door shut too, just in case of something else.
I feel like people are like seeing the open door and coming in though.
That's true,
Maybe
but as soon as people go in that lobby, it gets very loud in here. I can tell you, I've had a
Understood.
lot of feedback screenings in this room.
Understood. Yeah, feel free to come close, whoever is here, and so I'll ask them a few questions and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. But why don't we start with breaking in stories? Let's start with Megan. Like, what was the first major film you produced, directed, and or directed, and how did you get in a position to do that?
Let's see. So I came to Seattle after film school and worked on a lot of different movies. I actually directed a movie in 2002 that no one except, well, these two people have both seen it. But they're, oh my God, this is the best audience.
Fans in the audience.
Called First Day for Choking, that was shot mostly in Moscow, Idaho, where I went to undergrad and high school, and then I stopped doing that for a while, and I worked as in a variety of positions, cinematographer, AD mainly, on a lot of other people's films over the years in Seattle. In one of those cases, I produced a movie that I was also the AD of called Guatemalan Handshake, which was directed by Todd Rohal, who I have worked with on every one of his features, almost everything he's ever done. Lacey and Mischa have both worked with him as well, and that sort of was my first producing credit, because that wasn't something I was like going for, but I just like Todd's voice and I want to see his movies be in the world, so anytime he's making something, I just throw myself into it and try to help in any way that I can. But I would say that sort of my breakthrough as a director was Off Hours, which was produced by these two and another lovely lady named Joyce Size, who now lives in Texas. And we all worked on it for many years and finally got it off the ground in 2010. Shot it for very little money, and then it got into Sundance, which was like a huge accomplishment unto itself, just getting it into that festival, and then it's been sort of the reason I've been able to keep directing since then.
Cool. And we'll dive a little bit more into that film and the release around it soon. Lacey, how about you?
Similar kind of stories. I went to UW. I'm from Lake Stevens, which is a suburb north of here, and then went to UW for cinema studies, but it wasn't like a proper film school, and I really wanted to go to New York. I always wanted to apply to NYU. I actually had a professor be like, yeah, film school is kind of a lot of money and debt, and you just make short films, and you're already making short films. So I decided to give myself a year.
Smart guy.
It was a professor telling me that, and I was like, maybe, I don't know. But I was like, I really want to go to New York, and I was like really wanting to go to NYU. But I decided to move to New York and give myself a year, and if I wasn't working, I would then apply. And I moved. I had met Jennifer Roth through an internship I was doing for some producers of SIF. They were doing the fly films that year. I actually met Jennifer that way. She was a producer in New York, so I was like, I want to be a producer, and I want to live in New York. Can you tell me everything? I took her out to lunch, and she was thought I was adorable. I'm sure I was ridiculous. And but at the end of it, she was like, hey, I'm up for this gig. Do you want me, if I get it, do you want to be my assistant? It'd be unpaid, but you could get some experience. And I was like, definitely. And so then she called me in 2 weeks. She's like, can you be in New York in a week? And I was like, absolutely. So that's how I started. And I worked on The Squid and the Whale, which was an amazing film, an amazing experience. And then I started working in documentary production companies as a assistant to the executive producer and office manager. And I was working for a complete psycho who was like Devil Wears Prada, but like without the talent, or Meryl Streep. It was like the worst. So I had an opportunity to come
Meryl
back.
Streep could have at least been there.
Yeah, if it had been like Psycho Pants, but she's Meryl Streep, I totally would have done it. But instead, it was a totally creepy dude. So instead, I had an opportunity to do a sort of a nonprofit documentary back here in Seattle. So I came back. And while I was here, I started working on a documentary about Rat City Roller Girls called Blood on the Flat Track, which I was like, oh, I'll do it over the summer. And of course, 3 years later, I finally finished it. But that was my first feature that I co-directed and produced. And while I was working on other, mostly terrible, but some not, film productions here in town as a crew member to pay the bills, that's where I met these two ladies. And then, so my first real feature, certainly my first narrative feature, was The Off Hours.
Awesome.
As a producer.
As a producer.
Yeah.
Not a director.
Gotcha.
She directed that.
Yeah, I just meant you had done a lot of things on other narrative features.
Yes. That's true.
How about you, Mischa?
Well, it's interesting because your question is the first film that we either directed or produced, but like my story is similar to Megan's and Lacey's in that really to tell the story, go back to the first film set that I was ever on,
Right.
Which was so I went to I did an undergraduate of creative writing in Tucson, and then ended up going to film school in London, where I didn't talk to a smart professor that Lacey talked to, and I ended up accruing lots of debt. But in London. But it was in London.
In a really expensive city.
In one of the most expensive cities in the world.
With the worst exchange rate, someone said. Just
And not very good food either. But I came back, fast forward to coming up late 20s, living with my parents in Duval, Washington. If you're not depressed yet, it gets worse. with all kinds of student loans, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life and what I had done. And ended up
what I had done.
What I had
I had to figure
What
out
has happened to me?
You had to sit and reflect on it.
It's hilarious because I was actually, at the time, I was desperately applying for any job. It did not have to be film related. I had just gotten rejection letters from becoming a juvenile detention officer in Bellingham. I don't know, but
I think you'd be really good at that job.
I think I
Just
might.
for the record.
I might yet. And, anyway, so I ended up finding a Craigslist ad for a film right down the street from here, and working for free as an unpaid intern on a film called Cthulhu, which is where I met these two lovely ladies, and that was, over 10 years ago. While we were shooting in Astoria, Oregon, and getting no sleep, I got a hold of Megan's first film, First Aid for Choking, and watched it in the hotel room. And fast forward, so then we continued to all work together and decided that this film had to be made. And I guess it was 4 or 5, I think it was 5 years after that is when we actually got the opportunity to, we made the opportunity.
We said, fuck it, we're going to do this anyway.
And so the first film that I really, was a producer on was The Off Hours as well. But it's sort of, it's I think it's misleading to say that was the first, to lead with that, because in between there were 15, 20 other films that, and in the film industry that came up, and I worked in the AD department, like any of us, we sort of find different ways to be useful on another film set as we gain experience and make contacts. But yeah, I worked as a line producer at North by Northwest for about 3.5 years. and towards the end of my time there, got the opportunity to come over here and work with these guys.
So it sounds like working on film sets, making contacts, this process was arguably as important, if not more important, than like a film school education. Is that fair to say, or?
I think so. I mean, I'm glad that I got the film school education. Absolutely, the contacts of people that I met there, actually, I'm still in touch with, and and many of them are still making films, which is awesome. But I think I was going to go to law school for a while, for like 5 minutes before I went to film school, and I took a mediation workshop. And I swear to God, on a day-to-day basis for the last 10 years, I've used mediation and conflict resolution more than...
Excellent.
That's true.
Although I don't get paid as well as lawyers.
I want to explore what you said about, like you were working on the off hours for 4 to 5 years, meaning like trying to put the script together and get the financing together. I assume that's what you mean by working on.
Yeah.
Right? And then you said you made it happen, right? You willed it into existence. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you will into existence this Sundance film, The Off Hours?
Well, so I actually wrote the first draft of The Off Hours in 2003. We shot in 2010, just to give you a sense of like the amount of time. But and then we met in 2005. So there was a period of time where I was just kind of by myself working on the script, and then we sort of kicked it into gear as a group and started putting out a newsletter, and we got some seed money, and we went to LA and did some casting. We had this sort of I wouldn't necessarily say they were A-list, but definitely known talent attached to it. And then we had this idea that we were going to make this movie for $1.5 million, I think was our initial business plan, and we were trying to raise that money based on these sort of known actors, and really failing, just like not being able to get that money. And what
was the source of the seed money, just out of curiosity?
There was a couple
local financiers.
Local financiers,
okay.
yeah.
So like very like typical.
Who get
very mysterious.
Who get
but
a
okay.
small check once in a while.
You get a small
Still.
check once in a while. I actually should write some very soon. Yeah, so we basically like pitched to them like straight up, like, you know, we either already knew somebody or like somebody introduced, like everyone. Half of the people here also like knew we were looking for money for the off hours for the entire time that we were looking for money for the off hours. So there was a couple of introductions made, and we did our pitches. And so yeah, the two people who came in for the development funds were the, like, you know, really did actually, I mean, that first, like, trying to get like development fund financiers, that's something that we kind of don't do anymore. That was something that was a little more like done in like the late 90s, early 2000s, which was very much like what we still thought we should be doing when we were making the off hours.
Yeah, mind you, this is all like sort of right before
pre-financial crash.
Yeah, it was like before everything really shifted a lot in the film industry. It was like we were still kind of going by 90s model.
Right.
And we were very like responsible, and we're like, and this is it, we're gonna have these great names, and it's gonna like be this return on investment, we can pre-sale foreign, and it was just by the time we actually made the off hours, it was nothing like when we first thought we were gonna do it financially, like in terms of the model.
So the 1.5 million plan fell apart. Right.
Right, and that was like really 2008 financial crash. Like the
best time to make a movie.
We thought we were going to be shooting in literally the beginning of 2008, and like we had some money. We had half of our budget.
It was like so clear that we were going to.
We hired people. Like it was like we were all sitting in this free production office in ARIP, and like really just like trying to get the second half of our budget. We had found like a half of our budget that was dependent on the first half coming in. So it was sort of this bad scenario, and then the financial markets all fell apart.
It was like a house of cards. It just all went like.
And then Mischa took a job at North by Northwest, and Joy took a job. Joy was the other producer. She took a job at South by Southwest, actually.
Slam dance.
I was like, that's
both
convenient. I
moved
never
the
thought
fuck
of
out
that.
of Seattle, and Megan are like.
I was really like, it was a low point for me personally.
Joy is who, by the way?
Joy Sides is the other producer.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, yep.
And I was like, we're never making this movie. This is the most depressed I've ever been. And I was working on other people's movies all along this time, but it really took. We kind of put a hold on it, and actually. Technically, I suppose there was another actress. So, the not quite A-listers that I was talking about earlier that we had attached to the project were Aidan Quinn and Alicia Silverstone, and we couldn't raise the money with their names. William Baldwin at one point, and then but during that process of casting, we actually auditioned Elizabeth Berkley from Showgirls, Saved by the Bell,
Roger Dodger,
other better movies. And she was really good. Like,
She
Lacey
was-
and I were guilty as anyone of like not expecting her to be good, but like
Me
she
probably
walked
more
into
than
the
you.
audition room and gave a great audition, and then she kept emailing me for a year after her audition, saying how much she loved the script and how much she wanted to be part of it. And when we were sort of getting into our sort of most desperate time, end of 2008. She wrote me and said, listen, it doesn't seem like you're making it with Lisa Silverstone. What do you think about me going out with my name attached and trying to raise the money for you? Which was an offer we really couldn't refuse. And so we did kind of go out for a year. The year of 2009, we went out with her and attached other people who were great. Anthony LaPaglia, Campbell Scott, like really good actors, and still couldn't raise the money. And so in that time period, we were talking to her and we were like, at some point, I'm probably just going to make this for whatever I can put together. And she's like, I get it. It's your passion project. It's cool. I understand. And I went to South by Southwest and saw a movie called Alexander the Last, which starred Jess Wexler, but her sister was played by Amy Seimetz. And I said, if I could get anyone in the world to play the lead character in Off Hours, it would be her. And then I got introduced to her by Lynn Shelton and Ben Kasulki, and we started emailing and talking about it. And then you guys want to talk about the investor meeting we went to that caused us to...
Mitch and I were just talking about this. Yeah, so the three of us had worked on a film that Mischa line produced called Late Autumn, which was this big, beautiful Korean production that happened here in Seattle. And so we'd all been gainfully employed for several months. And at the end of it, while Mischa was still in town, we had this opportunity to pitch in front of a, quote, slate of investors for the Off Hours. So we did. We went to this event and it was super lovely. So we went and we like hadn't done it like for probably 6 months. Like we hadn't actually pitched it because we'd been like, we kept like taking these breaks and working on other people's films. And then so we pitched, and I have to say the three of us were there. Like it was a really good pitch.
It was
like,
a great
pitch. It was like a really good night. Like we were totally
You guys totally
on.
would have invested.
You would have put all
We
your money
made
into it.
ourselves very excited about the movie.
We did, and we'd always been wanting to make it, but it was like one of these like beautiful nights where everything was like totally like clicking, everything was great. And then immediately afterwards, when they started asking us questions, it became incredibly apparent that none of them, it was several folks with money, but they all wanted to make their own movies, and they had no interest in actually investing in anybody else's movies. And we were like, so we went out to Plum for a little post-partum depression dinner, and Mischa came up with a bold freaking idea, and she said,
Fuck it.
why don't we just make it? Why don't we just
Let's just make it.
I was
Yeah.
like, let's just do it.
And to like tie all this back to like specifically like the panel of the evening, I mean, this wasn't a film, like it's an amazing, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen it, obviously I'm incredibly biased, but it's a beautiful film, it's an amazing film, it's like obviously a film that I felt was incredibly worthy of my time for 5+ years, well really 10 years, because I'm never done. If you produce a movie, you're dealing with taxes every single year for the rest of your life. But it's incredibly worth it to me. But it's a movie that's an ensemble drama about like the night shift, and it's like beautiful and slow, and it's not a fast-paced action movie. This is not the kind of movie that's easy to get made. Like it wasn't just that the financial market crashed. It wasn't just that we were a bunch of ladies up in Seattle who wanted to make a movie. It's like it was not an easy film to pitch.
Let's delve into Fuck It a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that means you just made it with like money you could scrounge up from friends and
Well,
family.
we
and
actually
your own
had
savings.
so we had in our early 2008 period, we had this one investor who literally had to ask for her money back because she needed it for her own investments. Like she was like trying to recover as much money as she could, and we dealt with it in a way that she was really happy with. Like she was really impressed by her professionalism. We just kind of like, we had it in escrow, we gave it back to her, and she said, if you ever get it done, please reach back out. And so we did. After Fuck It, we wrote to her and we said, listen, we're gonna make the movie, we'd love it if you would put your money back into it. And she did. So she put in $10,000, and we like, we will make it for 10.
Yeah.
We didn't. We ultimately made it for 60, 70, around that, like by the end of the day. 100?
Yeah.
But it was...
Talk about challenging. Try working with these guys.
But so yeah, we were like, but we'd said like we will do it for 10 if we have 10. We called Amy Seimetz. We said, can you come to Seattle in April, May?
Yeah, and we were very like, we will make this movie for $10,000. Like that's what we will do.
Yeah.
We'll spend it on insurance and food.
Yeah, and then once we did that, then people were like, because we'd been like saying we're gonna make the off hours for the longest time, and we put out the newsletter like we're making the off hours. Once we knew that Amy could do it during the dates that we had, and then people started contacting us. And they're like, hey, do you need money? Like it was the exact opposite of like what the last 5 years have been. People were like calling us and saying like, hey, can I give you money? I would love to be an executive producer.
Maybe there's some like FOMO going on, like people see it's happening, they don't want to miss out.
Yeah, the FOMO model.
The FOMO model.
It totally was.
We definitely had the newsletter going for 5 years. It made it seem like it was a very exciting place to be. If maybe I was a little desperate at some points.
We had done so many press, so much press.
I mean, it really is astounding when you look at because I think that there was probably like 5 or 6 weeks between the night that we sort of all present here and Joy sat and said, we're going to make it no matter what. We're going to show up and we're going to bring whatever we have. And from that, I mean, I still
almost exactly 6 years ago in this neighborhood. Yeah,
that's
I
literally
still
blocked
get
away.
chills, like thinking about it, because it really was one of those things where that was sort of the deciding factor. And from that, the entire community, and we all had been working in Seattle on various other productions. We all had favors to call in. We had communities of people who were behind us. But what happened was this entire production just sort of like manifested in a period of weeks, and the experience is it's really profound. It was
like,
for me at least.
I think Oprah heard her story at Sundance and started The Secret. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah.
I feel like we are deserving of some like royalties.
This is
our lawyer call.
This is the first time I've actually heard this story in its entirety, so it's very inspiring, that you encountered many setbacks over many years, but still pressed on, and were even after like failing to accomplish your original business plan for the film, you decided that it was so important that the film be made that you were going to make it no matter what happened. Like if you only had $10,000, you were going to make the film no matter what. Okay,
Yeah.
so
and it's not really a movie that's designed to be made for that. Like semi trucks and like many locations, big ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Like it was like
good job. Man.
I know I wasn't really writing for the budget at the time. I thought I was making something bigger, but
so the purpose of like one of the elements of this panel tonight is about the like challenging films, right? Like making an indie film that might not appeal to a broad audience. As far as I know, none of you have made films with superheroes before. I could be wrong about that, but you've certainly all made films that are not sort of 4-quadrant films that appeal to like a wide mainstream audience. And it sounds like you would agree that The Off Hours falls into that category.
oh, for sure, yeah.
So
I know it's not for everyone.
Yeah. So what kind of animates you to, or animated you to make that particular film, or any other film in your filmography that you think falls in that category? Why do you think that's important? When the world was collapsing around you and the financing wasn't coming together, like what made you keep going in that situation?
Well, that one for me, I sort of speak to it as a director more than anything, and a writer because I wrote it. There was something about I worked at the night shift at Alpha Cine Film Lab, and I'd kind of seen I was sort of based on this experience I had working at this company where a lot of people sort of ended up and didn't have. It felt like the young people who were working there all had these other things that they were working on. Like me, I had my scripts, and other people had music and bands and stuff. And then there was like an older group of people who worked there who seemed like they had very little else, and they would sort of come in, clock in, and leave. And those people were interesting to me because I just felt like, did they have a passion at one point that somewhere along the way went away? And it just felt very relevant to me to make a movie about that, and sort of the loss of that drive in your life, and like remembering that at any point in your life you can sort of change your path and sort of become what you always wanted to be. And so that for me was always the driving factor, was this. I just felt like it was an interesting story that had relevance to me and a lot of people that I knew, and I really wanted to make it. I don't think it was really about like I just want to make a movie and prove I can make a movie. It was like I just wanted to tell this particular story, and I feel like whenever there's something that's not necessarily a big commercial script or whatever that I've worked on, which have been most of the things I've worked on as a not just as a director, but like as a producer and as a AD and all these other roles that I've done, it's been about like there's a voice in here that I feel like is worth supporting. There's a story here that I feel like is going to resonate with people. It's always something more, because it's never the paycheck, and for me it hasn't been anyway. And so that in off hours it's my baby, and
right.
And so it's sort of different, but even beyond that.
So Lacey, you're a producer of The Automatic Hate. We will not discuss the plot because apparently people are here. Presumably they have not seen the film yet. So, but I will say,
no spoilers.
Spoiler alert, it is a challenging film. Like, it is not a film that appeals to a wide mainstream audience.
You might not have heard it before a week ago, unless you worked on it.
So there is content in it that may shock and offend. No, I'm being exaggerating, but so kind of, and this is not atypical for you. You go after films that like are not mainstream as well. Those are the films that you produced. Not all of them, of course, but I mean, some of them. So what motivates you, like in this particular film or any other film?
Well, so I've sort of designed my philosophy of producing around I strive to make films that I really, really want to exist in the world. And I personally have a taste that's like, I love a lot of really mainstream, big budget Hollywood films. I love Star Wars, I love Indiana Jones, like those are some of my top favorite films of all times, but also I really, like some of my top favorite, films of all times are also Blue Velvet and Happiness, and those I also, put up there as well. So for me, it's just about the amount of time you have to put into producing a film, making a film is it's so much. It is like if you're actually going to make a living, make your life's work producing and directing films. Like it is so much work. It is all consuming. So there are so many people that make films, regardless of the content. And I can't imagine my life being exciting or worth living if that's what I was doing. Like I literally cannot, because why, a lot of people here work in film. Like why would you want to kill yourself for things that you don't care about? So for me, it's just about, does the script really grab me? And because I'm kind of a weirdo, I do tend to gravitate towards a lot of weird stuff. Not all weird, like The Office isn't weird, but I'm thinking about Todd Rohal's, work. Really out there, really strange, but like unlike any other voice I've ever read or seen or heard. So that has to exist, and I have to make sure that happens.
Right.
So
very cool. Any thoughts on this, Mischa?
Just a couple. I was thinking about the idea of like challenging films, and that can mean sort of a couple of different things. You can either be working with filmmakers or collaborators who are challenging.
That's true.
Which I have done.
Check.
Which all of us have done. Yeah.
You can be trying to accomplish something just by the content alone, or by the ambitions of the budget versus what the ambitions of the film are that are challenging, which I think we've all done as well. And I would say, like, for the off hours, there were not maybe a couple of challenging people on set, but they were not challenging on the off hours. And Megan is not a challenging person to work with. She's a delightful person to work with, and Lacey is the same. And there are
so is Mischa.
And I'm decent on most days as long as I have Diet Coke. But the point is what just to kind of dovetail what Lacey was saying is it really is you are working for something other than a paycheck on most films, and for many of us it's sort of like you're making choices where you're prioritizing this film being made versus, for me, it's like spending time with my husband and daughter, so it's like, this is the currency of life, and it isn't a big paycheck, and whatever, and I did have an experience while I was working at North by Northwest. It's gonna be completely candid, where I worked on
and North by Northwest, just so people know, is a digital agency, I believe, right? Or
it's a production company, and they do a lot of films. They're based out of Spokane, and they do Z Nation now, and they're very busy, and they bring a lot of work and a lot of productions to Washington State. And I had a great experience working there, in that I got to experience in a short period of time, probably about 3.5 years, as a line producer. I think it was 8 feature films, all ranging between 1.5 to 7 million. And so, what they do is they're a well-oiled machine, and they put content through, and they know how to do it, and that's it was a different culture and a different climate than what I experienced in Seattle. And so when I came back from there, the off hours was incredibly refreshing for me, because everybody was there because they really believed in the film needing to be made, and because they believed in Megan, and they believed, and it was this sort of whole community that was sort of different then. And there's not a right or a wrong. I mean, definitely there needs to be a place where where films make money, and and the commerce, and there's all that makes sense. But it's just to say that I do think that there's certain motivations, and on the off hours, for instance, I would Lacey and Joy and I would often be craft service as the producers. We would be like setting up, and every morning I would show up, and there would be these people who would show up who on past films at North by I had gotten into arguments over meal penalties and overtime, and they just and they continued to show up, and they were not getting paid, and it just really affected me, and it really made me reconsider and sort of readjust and think, okay, if I'm going to devote my life to storytelling in cinema, as I obviously have, you can tell by my student debt, it's like what is the work at hand? And for me, one of the important things is what are the stories that need to be told, and who are the storytellers that we want to get behind and support and vote by showing up at, because there are a lot of stories that are told with very plentiful budgets, and it's the same stories that we've all seen before, and I'm really more interested in some of the more subtle, diverse stories that, in those storytellers.
Got it. A couple more questions, then I'm going to open it up to the audience. But let's talk about distribution briefly. Getting these films made is half the battle. Getting them seen is the other half of the battle. And with challenging films, it can be challenging to find an audience. That's another one of the challenges that you can refer to when you're talking about challenging films. And so I guess, I assume if people are here today, they're kind of wondering, like, how do I get my challenging film made, or how do I get my challenging film seen? So do you have any advice or practical tips when it comes to that? Megan?
It's interesting, because I've had a lot of experiences with different movies now as a director, where I've had, things like The Off Hours, which was picked up by a very small distributor and sort of put out VOD only. We self-released our DVD. I literally handmade every part of that DVD. I routed the DVD menus and everything.
And you and I have every copy, and we ship it if someone orders a DVD.
Yeah, it is a cottage industry.
Still send the DVDs.
But there's that, and then to Lucky Them, which was put out by IFC. Which is a pretty well-known independent distributor, to my new film, which is going to be on television. It's like there's
Night Stalker, by the way.
Night Stalker.
Check it out later this year.
Do it. But yeah, it's like there's a lot of different. I've had a lot of different experiences, and it's always never. I've actually never heard another independent filmmaker say, "Man, I love my distributor." It is, there's great things about some of the people that I just mentioned, and I've seen other people have experiences where a distributor will put some money behind promotion, but for the most part, it's a sort of like a numbers game these days, and it's, they sort of take a lot of things in and sort of put them all out in the same way. And there's not a lot of sort of individual curation and thought put into a release, and with a challenging film, it's even more difficult, because it's with a lot of these movies that we're sort of talking about or talking around, there is an unknown factor, which is who exactly is the audience for this movie. They're not necessarily easy to reach. There's certain things you can do, like target distributors who are known to sort of be like Oscilloscope or Draft House, or people who are sort of known to traffic in these different products, that aren't everyone who's going into them knows they're not mainstream, but it's not there's not a lot of big money in either of those things. So it's a challenge. And then there's the self-distribution route, which actually I think Mischa probably can talk about more than any of us, that can be as effective as going through a small distributor. But the big thing that I always think is missing in almost every scenario I've experienced and watched other people experience is promotion and getting the thing to the person who will like the thing. Yeah. That sort of like directing the content is something that's lacking a lot right now with so much stuff in the world.
Totally. Mischa, did you want to follow up on that regarding self-distribution?
Yeah, I can speak briefly. I produced a film called The Immortal Augustus Gladstone, and
which is beautiful, and everybody should watch
awesome.
it.
I really love it. Really legitimately love it.
It is. It's a film that I'm really proud of to this day. I think it's interesting, and it doesn't fit into any kind of cookie cutter sort of genre, and we shot it we had like 12 people. And so it was a completely different sort of shape for production. And we were able to, I think, get some pretty amazing production value for the budget, and it was obviously a very low budget. When we got to sort of how we wanted to share it with the world, the director, Robin Miller, who's my husband, really felt strongly that he comes from a video game world where he was the creator of Mist and Riven several years ago, and he has sort of this weird niche.
Wait, your husband created Mist?
I know, isn't that awesome?
It's pretty cool.
It's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Well, my husband is babysitting my daughter tonight.
Nice.
Creative Mist still has
Mist,
to
by the
babysit.
way, for those who might not be old enough, was a legendary adventure game.
It was the first game I ever played all the way through.
Yeah.
Like, I was super starstruck when I first met him.
It was like one of the first games that used like CD-ROM and like video in a cool way. Anyway, sorry.
Sweet game.
I just had to geek out for a
hear this podcast.
Yes. Had to geek out for a second. Continue.
So he had sort of these monumental successes in a different industry, and because of that, and I honestly wasn't aware of the impact that Mist and Riven had on various different people, whatever. And it's big. I can tell you, it is. We'll still meet people, and different people will come up and say, this really, I played this for years, or this really made me want to go into video games, or whatever, design or stuff. And so when we got to distributing his film, it's a completely different industry, and so it was really a challenge for us, looking at how do we cross over and reach the people who are aware of the work that he and his brother did with Mist and Riven, and invite them, even though it's not like the film, The Immortal Augustus Gladstone, is necessarily like a companion piece in the least. It's been 10 years. He has different things to say. He wants to create something different, and he did. And I think he did it very successfully, but because he comes from that world of his experiences with distributing the video games, he didn't want to go the normal route. And so we had a lot of hard conversations where he said, I don't want to take it to the festivals. I don't want to, I have this product that I want to share directly with my fans and directly with the world. And we sort of looked at the landscape, and as you're all, I'm sure, aware, in the last 5 years, distribution, the climate and terrain of distribution has completely changed. And so we sort of took a gamble and looked at how could we do things creatively. And what we ended up doing is we worked with Ryan Davis, who is from Seattle, who's amazing.
Used to work in this building.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
So she helped us with sort of thinking outside the box. We had a partnership with, it's called Boing Boing. It's an online sort of curated website that has it's a collection of cool stuff, and Robin, was friends with them, and we had an exchange, and so we did a campaign through them. We really thought outside the box. We did, which I don't like that phrase, by the way, but we did. The character in Augustus, it was supposedly, you'll have to see the film, but it's basically he believes that he's immortal and he's living in Portland, and he disappears at one point. And so we created a video game. It's not exactly a video game, but it's a video companion where it's basically this.
It's like the website game. It's almost like, it reminded me of like the old like Donnie Darko or like Blair Witch Project sort of like amazing websites that I just adored back in the day, where it was like you got to go to the website, sort of play the like where is Augustus, like tracking down mystery sort of detective work. It's so cool.
It's interactive. Yeah, it's very cool, and it's unusual. So we sort of did all these different things. We ended up doing premiering it in LA, and we had a live band with a musician, and we kind of, we sort of did things differently, and it was a learning experience. I think that Augustus has found audiences. It has found its audience. I would not say that if I were to go back in time, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I would fight harder to go the traditional route through festivals. I think that at least this was 3 years ago, and I would say even today, I think that that framework of the festival circuit and of those places is still very, very necessary and valid. And
it's very difficult to beat the sort of stamp of approval of a sort of like that is sort of the
film
curation
media,
that
the
people
laurels.
Recognize right now is really film festivals more than distributors even, or like platforms of any kind. It's
true.
It's in film. It's
Yeah.
like hard. It's still that way. It may change.
It's also useful for other things like generating press. It's nice to have reviews and stuff like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And honestly, pretty darn necessary.
Yeah. Necessary for what exactly, Lacey?
For audiences to even hear about your film. I mean, that's the thing. It's like with our, absolute plethora of options these days. Like unless a certain website or certain writer that you're following is talking about your film, like how on earth will you break through to your audience? And back to your original question, I actually feel like of the things that if you have a challenging film, if you're trying to get a challenging film made, like it really would, even if you absolutely hate thinking about like I'm just gonna make this because it's art for art's sake, it's like you really do have, especially actually then you have to think about your audience from the get-go. Because you should be sort of backing into, okay, well, if this is my audience for it, how do I, like, what festivals do I want to go, like where do those people go, how do they consume media, how do I then get it to them at the end of the day, how am I going to make my movie and try to get it out to where they're actually going to find it, because if not, like,
I mean, I actually
the tree fell in the forest, and it's just too bad.
It's just a shame for that tree.
And it's a shame for that tree, because now the tree is down. It doesn't get to fall twice, it falls once.
That was deep.
That was
It's a beautiful tree.
It's
It's
a good
really
analogy.
Well. No one fucking heard it.
But I was just gonna say, what was I gonna say? I think the big gap right now that someone needs to fill is directing content to the person who will like the content. I think that there's so much stuff, and there's people who consume things in a lot of different ways. But I like, as anyone who knows who's like flipped through Netflix trying to find something to watch on a Friday, Saturday night, it's like really hard to find stuff that you
What a
like.
Monday, Tuesday, God. What do you do with your weekend?
All right, well, let's open it up to questions. I have some more questions here, but want to make sure the audience has a chance to ask any questions. So just, if you have any questions, raise
We're
your
filling
hand.
all of their needs.
Let us know.
They
Yeah,
are.
I think.
No questions, obviously.
If no questions, I'm just going to
Everything
continue,
everyone
guys.
wants
So, anyone? All right, right here in the front.
Heather.
Will we be able to see Night Stalker?
Oh, in the fall, but I'm not sure exactly the day. But if you're friends with me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, you will know, because I will inundate
Yes.
those feeds.
She will inundate people.
to know. You will be
With
spammed. Oh yes, you will be spammed.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
I'm wondering if you can talk about a lot of what you talk about is like is fiction and stuff, and I'm wondering if documentary seems like a whole other ball of wax. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Talk about
I feel
documentary?
like it's actually easier to find your audience with documentaries. I mean, that's the nice thing about documentaries is when you're asking the question about like who's my audience for this film, like it's a little bit trickier for airplane mode. What?
No.
It is.
It's a little bit trickier to figure out who your audience is. I think for a narrative film, I mean, certainly some of the more challenging ones we work on, it's like, okay, so, if Netflix recommends, like, how do you figure out, like, who's going to want to watch your movie? But for documentaries, it's like whatever your subject is, like, there's definitely already a built-in audience of, like, people who are interested in that subject. So that's a really easy place to start. And I feel like there's been a lot of, we were just talking about this recently, because we're doing a documentary as well, and I've had a little experience in I made a documentary about roller derby, which at the time was like a very niche, like, and there was like, here's the built-in audience, there is a flat track league in, every single state, like, let's get it to them, and it was able to be, we worked with a distributor who's small, but knew, like, hey, there's, it's a primarily gay distributor, Strand Releasing, they do a lot of gay content. They hadn't done a lot of lesbian films by that point. And there's, shocker, a lot of lesbians in roller derby. So they were like, let's get this, let's put it out. And they did, a pretty decent job about getting it to find between them going to the lesbian crowd and us going to all the flat track leagues that we had a connection with, it was able to really find the people who wanted to see the film. So there's a lot of documentaries that are doing a really great job of sort of that whole approach. Like they have a social media campaign and they have like something else that they're wanting people to do, like action items and like built in, like here's the cause behind the doc. If you don't have like a cause documentary, I think it might be a little bit trickier, but there's still, whoever your subject is, there's probably a built-in audience for that kind of a person. So I would just try to like think about who is that and how do I find them.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, go ahead.
So as far as like fundraising, things have changed since Not Powers. But like how
Yeah,
We
'cause
did
now
a
the
really
money
tiny-
rolls in super easy.
We did the smallest Kickstarter ever on
We
Off Hours.
did.
It was the first year of Kickstarter, but
We
go
didn't
ahead.
even have a video. We did not even have a video. We met our goal.
yeah. So like how, if you want to like elaborate on what the like fundraising
Yeah.
field is like today.
So the question is just about what is fundraising. I'm just repeating it for the microphone.
For the mic.
The question is, what is fundraising like today, and how do you approach it?
Ladies?
I just talked. It's your turn.
All right.
So yeah, Mischa and Lacey are more of the producer side, so you guys are more involved with that. Yep.
Well, I think obviously Kickstarter is a great example. Like the whole idea of crowdfunding is relatively new. I mean, we did it the first year, and since then I think that's an integral part of many independent films, whether they're documentaries or fictional narratives, and that also it gives Kickstarter or Indiegogo. There's Seed and Spark. There's all these different platforms that have the built-in benefit of giving you more opportunities to connect directly with your audience on an individual basis, and
And to carry it through the distribution too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly right.
I actually have something to contribute to this actually, because I think
Go ahead,
I'm
David.
the person that has most recently run a Kickstarter. For
Why don't you
So
contribute?
I hate to
Tell us
like
about it.
disrupt the entire reality of this panel, but I have actually made a film and I kickstarted it.
And it's a good film.
And thank you. It's
It
called,
is.
it's called The Primary Instinct. It's on Hulu right now. So I would say with regards to Kickstarter, very useful tool, but I don't think in and of itself, it's like if you just launch Kickstarter, it's not an if you build it, people will come kind of situation. Megan and Lacey, from my experience, Mischa probably too. I haven't. This is the first time we've met. So, but Megan and Lacey are really good about like getting the word out. Use your Facebook page. Use your Twitter account. Like get the word out about the stuff that you're doing. Beg, borrow, and steal. That kind of thing.
We're
But
used to whoring ourselves. It's true.
for me also, it's a matter of so I have a podcast that gets relatively decent listenership, and it's also about like making something else that people are interested in consuming, like on a somewhat regular basis. Like if you do that, then the people who are fans of you from that thing
Yeah.
have the potential to follow you to other things. And I've seen people launch Kickstarters that have done really well, and I've seen people that launch Kickstarters that don't do well. And the ones that don't do well, it's a matter of like they don't have an audience to begin with. If you don't have an audience to begin with, no one will want to support the thing that you're now doing with this Kickstarter. So my encouragement would be, if you're going to use one of these crowdfunding tools, to build something that people are interested in separate from this film that doesn't exist yet. And if people are fans of that, then they might be fans of you generally, and they might follow you to this new thing. The one other thing I'll also say about Kickstarter is it's kind of an interesting way of pre-selling
Yep.
the film, and that's both good and bad. It's good because you kind of get guaranteed receipts, like guaranteed people are buying the film. Theoretically, one of the rewards you offer is the film. Otherwise, it's just weird. One of the rewards is the film, and so you offer that reward, and then people pay for the Kickstarter, and they're kind of, they're pre-buying the film. But I will say, from my experience with my own Kickstarter, which raised $50,000, just so you know what the number is, you can go see it online, is that Kickstarter raised way more money than the final film brought in terms of receipts, like actual money that we made. So
Theatrical
it's almost like you're
receipts.
kind of like the entire audience for your film is like, or like not the entire, but like, 80%.
audience.
Yeah, your 80% of your audience is going to come to that thing, and then there might not be that much more after that, unless you have a big star or you break out big on the industry, on the film festival circuit. So anyway, some thoughts on the crowdfunding thing.
Yeah.
And I'd say I was actually, because we're talking to a documentary filmmaker, and she's just more likely going to be producing this documentary, and she's sort of just at the beginning of, she's been doing a lot of research, and hasn't started filming yet, and we're just talking to her now. And my recommendation was that, yes, I absolutely think we should do a Kickstarter specifically for, like, this is a documentary that has a built-in audience of people who care about this particular subject. But for that particular thing, I think for most documentaries, I think it's more helpful to do it after you've made the film or have at least gone through a good percentage of production. Because I think Kickstarter has shifted dramatically in the last 5 years from being something where people could discover your thing to something that's a lot more like pre-sale, or people who are looking for a specific interest could like attach to it. And now it really is almost more of a built-in like marketing, like the first push to actually get your film done or to get your film distributed before it's even done. And I think that now, because of how prevalent Kickstarter is, you can't just say, I'm trying to make a movie, please help me. The only people that are going to contribute to that particular Kickstarter are your friends and family.
Right. So what you're saying is it's more efficient or better to have the movie mostly complete already, and then use Kickstarter kind of more as a marketing tool than expect to raise money.
I think so, or at least partially shot and like be using it for post funds. Because I also think too, because for people who've made films, like like it takes so long to make a film, especially a challenging film that you're making on your own, off hours. Like you need to, people have such an expectation of Kickstarter because it is sort of a pre-sales thing now. Like if you're going to take 3 years from the time you do your Kickstarter, wait until you're a year away from making your movie.
Right.
So you're from finishing, not making, but finishing your movie before you actually.
Yeah, it's good to maintain momentum, right? Like you don't want to have someone like, hey, give me $15. 3 years later, here's your movie. That's not great.
Momentum is a very important element. I think that's the only reason that's like a huge factor in the off hours getting made, was like we decided in the end of February that we were going to make the movie on April 22nd, which is starting with my birthday. We were just like arbitrarily like, let's start shooting on my birthday, and then it was just like,
it wasn't so
not stopping.
You were like, I would like to start shooting.
And it's Earth Day.
Cool. And it's Earth Day. We were a green film. Going back to because everyone talks about Kickstarter, so it's like the best / worst question to be asked out for a panel. Like, how do you get your money? When you're making challenging films, if you have a challenging subject matter for a film, obviously, going out to the typical studios, the typical production companies, the typical financiers, that's not going to work. You have to figure out who is actually wanting to spend money to make this weird kind of thing that I'm trying to do, or this strange or specialty thing that I'm trying to do. And if that doesn't actually exist, you're going to have to, like we did with the off hours, you have to make it with your existing connections. Nobody wants to hear that. That's what it is. And so, think of who your friends and your family and your supporters, not just you as a person, but whoever the collaborators you're making the film with are, and try to go within that community. Because if you're trying to shoot for the moon, it doesn't work. And back to who's your audience for the film, also try to be respectful. Even if we've worked on films where they made a movie for $4 million. And we all knew when we read the script, working on this as a crew member, not as a producer, and we read the script, we're no one, there's not going to be $4 million worth of people who want to see this movie. This is a crap script. No one's going to get their money back. And they didn't. So, you should just have that respect. Even if you know $4 million worth of people, don't ask them for that money. That's just a great way to not make more movies.
Well,
because I've been drinking.
Well, you also said
know.
the thing that I think is if you're doing something that's sort of small, and we've talked a ton about the off hours in this panel, so I apologize if people have heard it ad nauseum, but
go buy the off hours, guys. That's
Lacey, or I will send it to you from our apartments. But
hand deliver, it's easier.
But there is more. There are other ways of making stuff that don't involve money that you can. There's various currencies out there that it's just all about finding the win-win with everybody you're working with, and making sure that everyone feels like they're coming out of it with something gained.
Yeah, and a real quick shout out to grants, because we live if you're here, you're probably close to Seattle or live in Seattle. We have an amazing plethora of grants for artists in Seattle specifically and in King County. Like, look at For Culture, look at the, what's the other one?
We got a For Culture grant.
We got
for
a For
off hours.
Culture grant for off hours. Yeah, it's like there's several grant opportunities. Artist Trust, like take a look, because that's specifically what they're built for. Look at the Washington Filmworks Innovation Lab project. I mean, these are really great opportunities for like up and coming artists in the city and in the county, and sadly not every state in the nation gets to take advantage of that.
Got it. Good advice. Well, I could keep hearing you guys talk about film for hours, but we have a movie to watch, Lacey's movie,
Hey.
The Automatic Kate. So let me just again point out that joining us today is Mischa Jakupcak, who is a producer on films such as The Immortal, Augustus Gladstone, and The Off Hours. Lacey Leavitt, who produced The Automatic Kate and a bunch of other movies, and Megan Griffiths, who wrote and directed a movie called The Off Hours. You guys might have heard of it. And her new film, Night Stalker, is going to be out later this year on television. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause.
Thank you, David Chen.
And I'm David Chen. You can hear my work on the Slash Filmcast.
Which
Thank
is
you
really
for coming.
good.
Rent the
And,
Primary Instincts
Yeah,
and all of these
The
movies.
Primary Instincts on Hulu.
Lacey, do you just want to?